Welcome back to another episode of ManaTutor MTG Draft. You'll see today we have a special holiday episode. Matt's live in the office here with me, and we will be going over some Lost Caverns of Ixalan Draft 17 lands data today. We took a little bit of a break for holiday break, but we'll be back here today doing a little bit more deep dives. Today we're going to be going over how to stay open in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And in particular, I think it's interesting to go over how to pick cards that go into multiple archetypes and how to figure out what those cards are. A lot of people some people just draft off a feel alone. Some people, and I would hazard to bet almost everyone would improve their win rate if they do use stats to some degree. Yeah. Don't, just follow stats blindly, but if you were to pick by win rate, that does a decent shot at improving your win rate, at picking the higher winning cards first. But I do think there are times when you should not pick the highest winning card in favor of picking a slightly lower winning card that keeps you open,
or that will go in your deck or whatever you want. So this is like part 2 of our how to stay open. We kind of showed our drafts, and now this time it's going to be more of the stats data driven aspect of that.
Exactly. And I think, so you had mentioned before kind of like your approach of like pick the best cards early on in the draft. And then after that, pick the cards that are in your colors, right? That you kind of lean towards. And that's, that makes sense. I think there's kind of a third step of like, okay, what if I don't have a particular card in my color that I want to take? And, there's a few cards that are the same roughly power level. How do you pick which card to take at that point? And I think that's where you want to pick the card that leaves you to the most open possibilities down the line. I think this will often come up when you maybe already know one color, but you're still between multiple colors for your second, for example. And how do you know which one to pick in that case? And I think it's about, while you do want to narrow in on what archetype you're going to land in, I don't think you want to decide that, right? Really, the people past you cards are the ones that are deciding where you should draft. And leaving yourself as open as possible will, I think, improve your win rate in these cases.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. And I think that's what we're going to kind of get into here today, just going over, how cards fit into certain archetypes and how many archetypes those cards fit into, and therefore being able to pick the card that will leave you open to either different archetype, like as many different archetypes as possible. So when you get something on your 5th or 6th or 7th pick, like you can say, okay, I've got the bare bones for this, and I can now take it in this direction, or I can take it in that direction, whichever way works.
Exactly.
Based on what you're seeing.
Yep. So before we do that, I do want to give an update. We never resolved our bet. So looking at the win rates since, we always do like within 3 weeks of the set to give it some time to play out. So I have filtered here for the first 3 weeks of the set and filtering in for our black cards. If you don't remember, Matt had Fanatical Offering.
Yep.
And that's 1 black as initial cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards, create a map token. And I had Deadweight, which is below at enchanted creature gets -2/-2. So Fanatical Offering wins. Matt, you win the bet.
Yeah.
You got a 55.3% win rate. And
which is still not amazing.
Yeah.
Right. But that's because black's is the worst weak color.
Yeah.
But still, beats it by about what? 0.4%.
0.4%. Yeah. So,
so pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah. Deadweight at 54.9%. I don't think either of us are that surprised with these numbers, though. I mean, maybe the black overall being so low, but the Fanatical Offering, I remember when making the bet, like, I don't know. I don't know which one's going to be right here. I did think Deadweight would win, and it doesn't in this case. I think that's because black is so grindy.
Yeah.
And, being able to, sacrifice. There's a lot of different artifacts, treasures, etc., map tokens to sacrifice.
Yeah, the fact that you can use that on a treasure token is or a map token is good.
Yeah, good value. So,
and I remember when we were doing this bet, I was contemplating between Fanatical Offering and Tithing Blade as my two choices. I would have won either way. I just want to point that one out. They're both good as far as black commons go in this set.
Yeah, I think I said, though, if you took Tithing Blade, I wasn't going to accept that challenge.
Right. Yeah.
Because Tithing Blade is, especially just because it's an artifact in this set, like doing the sacrifice something, but that the whole additional artifact to craft with or another permanent.
And it's got its own craft on it.
Yeah.
So, no, if it was just a 1 mana or like 2 mana edict, like sorcery, it would be trash.
Yeah.
But the fact that it works with the mechanics of the set so well, and gives you something later on that effectively gives you, a life drain engine later on in the game if the board stalls out or something is actually pretty good. So.
Right. This is one of those interesting examples, though, where I agree with the average last seen at. Like, I'm picking Join the Dead before Tithing Blade, even though Tithing Blade is slightly technically better by win rate.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Take your removal first, but
yeah, there are sometimes win rate you don't always perfectly go by win rate when in pick order, and that's because like Join the Dead is just
it's murder, effectively.
It has more opportunities to destroy something that you really need off the battlefield. So it kind of leaves you more flexible. But yeah, so let's kind of dig into the other cases where win rate isn't the only determining factor, and that's staying open for what you're going to have in the future of the draft. And I like to use these graphs. So this is under the analytics tab, card data comparison, and then filtering the x-axis for average last seen at, meaning everything on the left-hand side here is cards that are picked earlier in the draft, and everything on the right-hand side are cards picked later in the draft. And then the game in hand win rate being the y-axis, so the higher up, the more winning it is, the lower, the less winning it is. I like to filter for top players because the idea is to mimic the top players. So let's see what they're doing. And then we know we're going to end up, especially in Lost Caverns and Ixalan, in generally a 2-color archetype, maybe with a splash, but in general, 2-color archetype. So we have 10 different options here effectively we're looking at. If we filter for those archetypes, starting with, say, white, blue, and then we want our win rate to be ideally targeting above 60%. That's a pretty good threshold. Different people could have different thresholds, but 60% for winning players and up is a pretty good target. And then to start writing down for those archetypes, what are the top cards? So we have like Waterwind Scout, Petrify, Oltec Cloud Guard. We have Tinker's Toad is even above 60% here. Miner's Guidewing. If you write those all down and then do that for every single archetype, you end up with a count that looks like this. So this is simply doing that, writing down on one side with the archetype it's a part of, and then doing a pivot table counting for the number of occurrences of archetypes that card showed up in as 60% more or higher win rate. And in general, you want to pick the 4 count cards, generally above the 3, above the 2, because it'll leave you more open.
And to be clear, like if you look at the ones in the that have 4, none of these are surprises, right? Like you think about Oltec Cloud Guard, 2 for 1, excellent card. It's going to work in any type of deck, right? It's going to work in black-white sacrifice because you now have a 1/1 that you can sacrifice. It's going to work in blue-white artifact craft because it gives you an artifact. It's same with red-white artifact craft. And in white-green, I mean, it's still not bad, right? Like it's still going to be a good card, even though it's not necessarily geared towards the specific sort of, explore type stuff that white-green would necessarily be interested in, right? So yeah, the fact that that's there, all the rest of the ones in that category make perfect sense. A Braid, it's just good removal, right? Like it's going to go in any red deck. So yeah, none of those are surprising at all. And then, obviously you see the ones at the bottom, conversely, right? Although I might disagree with a couple of them here or there. Like Cavern Stomper, I think is good in a lot of green decks, even if you're not playing dinos. It's a fine finisher, but I'm assuming the the one that it's super good in is green red. Without looking, that's going to be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we even have, you can technically see the archetypes here. So Cavern Stomper is, red green. Yep. Yeah, so, but you can kind of tell, like, it makes sense in a lot of cases. So, like Goblin Tomb Raider, okay, that thing depends on artifacts. So it's going to be in your artifact colors. So that's going to be red, white, or red, blue.
Yep.
And those will be the two archetypes
Absolutely.
it's good in.
And if you look at it,
and yeah, exactly. It's blue, red, and this one's got to be
blue, white,
or white, red. Yeah, that's what I meant. So yeah, same type of thing with like Waylaying Pirates. Like that's good on an offensive deck. So you need to have an artifact in play for it to put the stun counter. So this is best in blue, red. So if we were to look and see there, blue, red.
Yep.
So you can kind of see that type of pattern. Same thing like Unlucky Drop, same type of thing as Waylaying Pirates.
Dinotomaton, good in the Dino deck, right?
Exactly.
And but not necessarily somewhere else. Although again, I don't think Dinotomaton's a bad card. But this is just solely looking at 60% win rate.
Right. So it could very well be 59%, 58%.
Yes.
But this is an approach to easily pull and come up with this. And you might set your threshold to be 50. If you're targeting a 58% win rate, you can kind of open up a little bit more, and maybe get Dinotomaton and a few other, maybe like a white, red or something.
Where it would also probably be a pretty good card.
Yeah. But yeah, it gives you an idea of where things are good at, where they're not so good at.
Yeah.
And then at some point, like if you're waffling between a couple colors, you might pick like, I know I am white. And in that case, I'm going to filter for all the white card or the white archetypes and then see, what's in more archetypes that way. So then I will take
your guide wing.
Like maybe like Deconstruction Hammer over, I don't know, over some of these other low ones. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I must have filtered wrong. Then we had another chance. Oh, another chance is the white black. Okay. That makes sense. So yeah, that's just kind of a good approach to keep you open to multiple colors.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you as well, you can easily just do this by, if you know you're going to end up in a particular archetype, right? You can just search for one archetype and say, okay, these are the best cards in that archetype. So conversely, even after you've stayed open and you've now settled on I am, white, red, let's say, you don't have to necessarily open up a chart again. You can easily just, like, if you've got it in that Excel spreadsheet, like you do, you can just say, okay, I'm just going to look at the best cards in white, red, right? So if you just selected white, red, for example.
I got you. Yeah.
There's your 60% win rate cards.
Yeah. I just, at that point, I would tend to,
you can look at the graph.
Go and see what the actual game of hand win rate is of, and kind of scroll on down there and see like what's winning the most.
So the idea of this would be, another data point to consider while you're drafting, as you're kind of seeing cards come by. Maybe one of your colors, taking the cards that work in all of the other potential colors or other archetypes that you would could end up in still is generally good, right? And knowing which ones to take, like Miner's Guide Wing, right, plays in everything.
It is interesting. So sometimes you get cards that play in every archetype, but they are still cards that you don't want to pick with a very high pick as well.
Yeah.
So like, I think a case of that would be Staggering Size. Yeah. So it plays well in all the different green decks, but that's like, if you're going to be in green, it becomes your safe pick. Like if you pick that, you're going to play it. But maybe you don't know you're going to be in green. And at that point, you kind of have to decide like whether you want to pick something else.
If I didn't know if I was in green, I probably wouldn't pick a Staggering Size.
Yeah.
Right. Because it could just be a wasted pick. But yeah, to your point there as well, there are some that you got to obviously play around what you have. If you're desperately needing, low drop creatures, you're not going to pick something up high on the, mana curve, so to speak. Although I would note basically everything in these lists are like 1, 2 with the occasional 3. I think Oltec Cloud Guard might be the most expensive thing.
Yeah, that's
here.
partly because we have a fairly aggro set.
Yes. Yeah. No,
so-
I'm just saying to note, like, you're going to find more of your 1 and 2 and 3 drops here, and not your 6 drops, so to speak. Although there's a couple of them, right? Oltec Cloud Guard, Whaling Pirates. There's a few on here, but for the most part, it's those 1, 2, and 3 drops that you're going to see.
Yep. I guess one way to kind of tell, like, other than win rate, whether you should pick a card is actually seeing are other people picking it highly or not, because that's an indicator of also assuming other people are also trying to stay as open as possible. They will be picking the lower also cards early, and that was kind of the same example we had with our black earlier of picking Join the Dead over Tithing Blade. So
sort by average last seen at for all the commons.
Well, this is specifically was white red. So average last seen at top to bottom. So like a braid, people are because it goes everywhere.
Although hilariously enough, right? I see that at like 6 or 7 fairly frequently. I mean, obviously it's average last seen,
but that's a good signal that red is open at that point, and so they're just not picking it, and you're taking it then. But it is interesting. So some of these, like, I would disagree with how soon it's taken. Like Tinker's Tote does not play in that many kinds of decks with different archetypes perfectly. Like it works really well in your red white, like multiple artifacts taps type of deck. Blue can sometimes do that. I think Tinker's Tote showed up as like a 3 or something. I guess so. It's really just more like your white green Tinker's Tote won't do anything.
Yes.
Maybe was Tinker's Tote maybe a 2? Where is it? Oh, it's even 1. Okay, so it is just white red.
Yeah.
That's where I've been playing it.
Not that it's a bad card in the other ones necessarily, but
it might be. It's possible it shows up as blue white in your controlling blue white versions. Yeah. So I'm actually kind of curious now which one it is. This one is blue white. Yeah, so it's the controlling version that.
But to your point, it is good in white red. It is good in white black. But it's not 60% win rate.
Right. So that's it for today. We just wanted to give kind of a short little intro into alternative ways of drafting and staying open, not just using win rate, not just using average last seen at, but combining that with how to keep your options open and then narrow into the particular archetype that you fall under. Hope that helps. There are some other interesting tips and tricks on 17 lands we might go over at some point. The cards themselves, as you click on them, now have new features that show like the win rates and the variances of different archetypes that they're in and stuff like that too. So if you do become a patron of 17 lands, check that out. There's some cool stats to show. But yeah, that's all I want to show today. Stay tuned we're going to have a Nemesis booster pack opening coming up for the holidays here. So like and subscribe to make sure you see that. And otherwise, see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.